Taxi driver gets fired for giving a ride to a homeless woman and her son. Days later, she shows up at his old job and makes her former boss cry. Hello. Welcome. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Davi was tired. He had done several runs to make up for the repairs that needed to be done on the car. He had been working for 6 months in a taxi fleet and was assigned to the worst car they had. To make matters worse, David would be responsible for repairing parts of the car and future problems. The fleet had specialized mechanics who checked the cars periodically, but David's was the only one that was not inspected. All this because his boss, Jeremiah, didn't like him. Jeremiah's reasons for disliking David were never made clear, but it made his life very difficult. Since the car was constantly having problems and the money for the repairs came out of David's pocket, he was always left with little money at the end of the month. This situation was tiring for him, but David had nowhere to go. He came from the countryside to get a better life in the city, but the only job he could find was as a taxi driver. Besides, he hadn't finished his studies and looking for another job was out of the question, since he was barely surviving on what he earned. It was a Saturday night when David arrived from his last trip and was already on his way home. Where do you think you're going? You still have a ride to make. Don't get drowned and go pick up our client, because all the other cars are occupied, said his boss Jeremiah. David's blood boiled with anger. Not because he had to work more, but because of the way his boss spoke to him. Besides, he needed this job and had to obey everything. Yes, I'll go as soon as possible. Don't worry, said David. Jeremiah gave a snobbish smile and watched him leave in the taxi that was almost falling apart. David was very tired and wanted to rest, but he couldn't. His job was his priority at the moment. It was half an hour before midnight, and because of the heavy rain, David was driving very slowly. While he was stopped at a traffic light, he heard knocking on the car. Please help me, my mother is not well. Help me take her home. David was scared and saw a boy who was very dirty and practically wrapped in a cloth that looked more like a floor cloth screaming for help. After looking closely, he noticed that there was a woman next to him who was as poorly dressed and dirty as he was. The woman didn't look well, and it seemed like she was going to faint at any moment. For a second, David hesitated and thought it might be a trap. Times were dangerous, especially in the early hours of the morning. However, the boy's cries for help reached his heart. They didn't seem like lies. After opening the back door of the car, David said, "Come on, get in. I'll take you to the hospital," said David. The boy helped his mother get in, and they both sat in the back seat. The woman, who could barely keep herself upright in the seat, said, "You don't have to take us to the hospital. It's too far away. I don't know if I can handle it, but we live nearby, just a kilometer away. We live in a cemetery. They have the medicine I need there." Davi was shocked when she said she lived in the cemetery. Could that be true? As scared and shaking for his life as he was, he knew that the nearest hospital was too far away, about 20 kilometers at best, and the cemetery she was talking about was very close. Davi had already passed by the old cemetery several times, which was abandoned because the city government had bought another piece of land to be the city's main cemetery. So the old one was abandoned, and there were several vacant lots around it. Even though he was scared, he went to the place. It was a quick race, but the car didn't reach where the woman said she lived. "Sir, please help me take my mother to our house. She can't walk in this state, and I don't have the strength to help her," said the boy. David thought, this is too much. He was afraid of the whole situation. What if it was all a show to trick him and take his things? But something in the boy's eyes seemed pure and genuinely concerned for his mother. "God protect me," David thought. "I just need a minute," he said. David picked up his radio and spoke to a taxi driver friend to pick up the passenger who was going to pick him up. It would take much longer, but he would pay for the damages the customer suffered. After that, he got out of the car and went to the woman to help her walk through the entrance of the cemetery. David helped her walk while his son stood by her side holding her hand. The three of them walked very slowly through the old cemetery. The dawn and the moonlight made it seem even more terrifying. David felt a chill down his spine with every step and was prepared for everything, except for what was to come next. They arrived at a small, dark, dilapidated house that looked like something out of a horror movie. The boy unlocked the door, and when he opened it, they went straight inside. David was amazed to see a very simple little house with a stove, a small refrigerator, a mini dining table, and a nearly broken door that led to the bathroom. It was all very simple, but there was an air of warmth inside. The woman went to the old sofa and asked her son for the medicine box. After taking an injection, the young woman came to life and gradually improved. Meanwhile, her son tried to make something for his mother to eat, but it was clear that the boy had no skills in the kitchen. David was calmer because it was all true and he was not in danger, so he went to help the boy. There was practically nothing in the fridge. He gathered wheat flour, milk, and a little sugar to make a pancake for the woman to eat. She and the boy ate and thanked him. "Thank you so much. You saved my life. I don't even know how to thank you. My name is Manuela, and my son's name is Pedro." The woman got up and looked much better. She went to the stove and made him some tea. After drinking tea, David thanked him and said he had to go, as it was very late. Manuela, who was much better, said she would accompany him to the car, as she knew the way through the cemetery better. This place at night can become a maze if you don't know the way. As the two walked through the tombs, the moon appeared between the clouds. David noticed that behind all that dirt there was a young woman, but he didn't say anything. David got into the car, and Manuela thanked him by holding his hand. "It's going to rain soon. You better go home soon," said David. After putting the keys in the car, he felt calm that everything had gone well and he could help someone. He started it several times, and the car never started. A storm began to form in the sky. Davi looked at the car from all sides and tried several things, but nothing worked. From afar, Manuela watched the young taxi driver trying to leave in his old car. "I don't think there's any way. I'll talk to Central and try to get a tow truck," he thought. David tried using his cell phone and the radio he had from the taxi company, but nothing was working. This has to be a joke, he thought. Little did David know that the storm had already passed through another region, knocking down trees and transmission towers, leaving thousands of people without cell phone signal. "You can stay with us tonight if you want," Manuela said. Davi was out of options. He didn't want to sleep in the car that was next to the cemetery, but he was also afraid of sleeping in a house that was inside the cemetery. Davi accepted, and the two went back before they could get soaked. "I'll put a sheet on the couch so you can sleep well," said Manuela. While she arranged everything so he could sleep, the two talked. "Why are you living here in the cemetery, and what happened to make you feel sick?" asked Davi. "I was picking up trash in a nearby dump, but I felt sick and needed my medicine. I spent hours trying to walk, but I couldn't. My son was here at home and came after me. When I saw him, I was worried that he was walking alone at that time of the morning, and that gave me more strength to walk. It was then that we saw his car, and he ran to ask for help. We had already spoken to several other people, but no one stopped to help us. You were the only one. As for living, I had no choice, but I lived on the streets for a while. So this place is much better than living on the streets. I'm not afraid of the dead. They don't harm me, but the living, they have already destroyed my life." David felt anger and sadness coming from Manuela's voice. "A few months ago, I got out of prison, and after picking up my son, I came to visit my father's grave. While I was in tears, the caretaker of this place saw me and, taking pity on me and my son, said that there was this small house that served as a cemetery storage room. He removed everything except the furniture and said that I could stay as long as I needed. David heard everything. It was explained why they were dirty, they were in a dump, and it explained why she was feeling unwell. However, the part about her having left prison scared him. Would he really be safe sleeping in that house with her? David thought and got scared. Noticing his look of fear, Manuela said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I haven't committed any crime. Believe me, I'm innocent, and I'll soon prove my innocence to everyone." Her words calmed David. Pedro was playing with an old doll when suddenly the boy blurted out a few words in English and a few in what sounded like Italian. David was not fluent in English, but he had picked up a few foreign passengers and noticed that the boy spoke well. How could a boy who barely had a place to live speak two languages? Something didn't seem right. Manuela also showed signs of having a bearing and a way of speaking to people that few people have. He was surprised, but he was very tired and slowly fell asleep. In the morning, Davi woke up to the sound of something frying and the pleasant smell of pancakes. Pedro was still sleeping peacefully in the small, old single bed, and Manuela was at the stove. There was such a good energy in that house. Davi couldn't explain it. It was something cozy. It was the feeling of being at home or visiting his grandmother's house. Did you wake up? I prepared some pancakes and some coffee. I didn't have much, but I did the best I could. I hope you like it. Davi ate it and was surprised. With just a few ingredients, she made something even more delicious than what he had made the night before. He thanked her and said he needed to go check on his car. Davi and Manuela went to the car, and for a few hours he tried to fix it until he finally managed to fix it. Manuela called Pedro. "I'm going to take you out for a snack," said Davi. Manuela smiled and immediately went to call the boy. He took them to a snack bar and let Manuela and Pedro choose whatever they wanted. The boy was embarrassed, but his hunger was greater than his shame. He ate a lot and had a smile on his face. As they left the cafeteria, Manuela asked for one more favor. "I don't want to take advantage of your goodwill. You've done so much for me and my son. I want to ask you just one more thing. If you could take me to the bank, I would be very grateful. You're not going to rob the bank, are you?" David said jokingly. "No," Manuela smiled. "There's something there that belongs to me, and I'll finally be able to prove that I'm innocent." David drove to the bank and left them there. Before leaving, Manuela said, "Thank you, David. I can't see you as a human being because I don't like people. I see you as an angel. At the moment, I can't pay for the taxi ride or what you did for me, but know that I will never forget what you did. Thank you very much." The two said goodbye, and David couldn't stop smiling. He felt good about doing the right thing. However, his smile disappeared immediately when his cell phone signal came back. There were dozens of messages from his boss, Jeremiah. The situation didn't look good at all. David thought about calling him, but it would be better to explain everything in person. When he arrived at the company, he saw Jeremiah at the entrance, red with anger. "You're the worst employee I have had in years. Why didn't you answer my calls, and why did you send someone else to pick up our client?" Jeremiah asked. David apologized and explained the whole situation. He also said that he would pay for the ride of the person who didn't show up and also any losses the company suffered. Jeremiah, however, didn't listen to him. His boss knew that much of the city was without signal, but he just wanted to humiliate his employee. The company also suffered no losses and the customer did not complain. Jeremiah wanted to make David feel humiliated in front of everyone, but David was tired of all this. Even if he paid for the damages, he would still be treated this way. Finally, he politely spoke to his boss and said that this was very unfair to him, who was being persecuted. Jeremiah became even more furious and said that David did not need to work there anymore and asked for the keys to his old car that belonged to the company. David was surprised. He had no idea that Jeremiah would be capable of firing him for that. In the short time he had been at the company, he had seen taxi drivers do worse things, and they hadn't even been warned. He was almost in tears and wanted to beg not to be fired. David needed that job, but he held back his tears and just handed over the keys and walked out the door. He had no money and no car. David walked 4 kilometers to reach his old apartment. He cried in bed, wondering how he would pay the rent that was coming up and how he would eat. All of this disturbed his sleep. He had been looking for a job for weeks, but he didn't have a high school diploma, which made it very difficult to get a job. He had been fired for 3 weeks, and there was only water in his refrigerator, and his rent was late. He didn't know what to do. His only alternative would be to go back to the countryside. Life wouldn't be any easier there, but at least he would have a place to live with his parents. Davi put the few things he had in a small suitcase and a backpack. He was waiting for a taxi driver friend who would take him for free to the bus station, where he would spend the only money he had on a ticket back to his homeland. After hearing a knock on the door, David answered it expecting his friend. However, he was startled by who was on the other side. "Hello, I said I would come back to pay you." David looked for a few seconds and could not recognize who it was. but his jaw dropped when he realized it was Manuela. She was wearing a beautiful dress, jewelry that looked like diamonds, and earrings that looked like pearls. David was so impressed by her appearance that he only later noticed Peter standing behind her. The boy was well-dressed and looked like a young model from a television commercial. David invited her in and made her some tea. "My God, you look so good. Did you really rob that bank?" David said jokingly. Manuela smiled and said that justice had only been served. While he was drinking tea, David received a call from his friend. "David, I can't come. Something urgent happened at the company. All the taxi drivers are here. I'll talk to you as soon as I can." As soon as he hung up, Manuela started talking. "Years ago, I met a man. I fell in love with him. It was love at first sight. We got along so well. I loved him, and he loved my money, my father's money to be more precise. My father had an empire and was very rich, but he met a woman who only wanted his money. She and her son did everything they could to ruin my life, and when my father passed away, they had the opportunity to get rid of me. They were greedy and wanted all of my father's inheritance, so they teamed up with my boyfriend to deceive me. They came up with a plan by forging documents and making me look like a criminal. And they succeeded. I was convicted in record time. My boyfriend received some reward from them and disappeared, but he didn't know I was pregnant. Inside the prison, I had Pedro, who after a while went to live with my stepmother and her son. That hurt me. I was afraid of what they might do to him. Because I behaved well, I was released after a few years. The court allowed me to visit my son. Despite living in a mansion, Pedro was unhappy and was mistreated by them. I had nowhere to live, but he still didn't want to go back there and preferred to live with me on the street. My stepmother didn't bother to go after him and even thought it was good that he came with me. I suffered on the streets with him, with no place to live, but my son was my strength and I would do anything for him. On the day my father passed away, I went to visit him at the cemetery, and that's where I got help from the caretaker. The day you took me to the bank, I got documents that proved my innocence. Weeks later, the court dropped my charges and also ordered my stepmother, her son, and my ex-boyfriend to be arrested. Everything that was rightfully mine was returned. Without your help, everything would have been more difficult, and I might not have survived that day. After I was arrested, you were the only person who treated me well despite my appearance, where I lived, and my past in prison. I want to thank you for everything. I know what happened to you at work, and I know I'm partly to blame for it. If you hadn't helped me that day, you wouldn't have been fired. As a thank you, I bought the company. At that moment, David almost fell off the couch. "What do you mean?" he said. "I bought the company and I'm changing the management. The old boss is still there, but I'm going to tell you personally about the change in management," said Manuela. "And who will manage the company?" asked Davi. "You," she said. It was a lot for him to take in, but his smile never left his face. The three of them went to the taxi company and Jeremiah was there, distressed to learn of the new management. He was so sad that he even cried as pride was hurt. Manuela announced in front of everyone that David would be managing the company and that Jeremiah was fired. However, David, upon seeing his former boss in tears, asked Manuela for something, and she agreed. David said that Jeremiah could work for the company, but he would be a taxi driver and would drive his old car. Furthermore, the company would not pay for any defects. They would come out of Jeremiah's pocket. Jeremiah wanted to argue, but he was not in a position to, so he accepted without hesitation. Despite his lack of education, Davi surprised everyone by managing the company excellently, increasing its revenue by 30%, all because he treated all the taxi drivers well, who in turn treated the passengers better. Manuela and Davi became good friends, but this friendship did not last long, as it turned into love and the two became engaged. Davi looked at Manuela and Pedro, remembering their beautiful story, which began as a horror movie and ended as a love story. I hope you enjoyed the story. Like, comment, and share.